Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's working group, March 3rd, March 27th. Uh, so kicking things off with project updates. One of the things that we wanted to call out is soon we'll be putting up an RFC to kind of uh, outline the story of the integration testing we would like to add as part of the core project. These testings will be mainly focused on cloud agnostic aspects, mainly testing around the capability of the disruption, provisioning, drift, expiration, and core components, node pool, node claim provision, yeah, CRDs and things of that nature. The Like we previously mentioned, most of the integration tests today live in the AWS provider. We want to bring all cloud like agnostic tests into the core project, run them under Quark provider, and then that way that'll also be a mechanism for other cloud providers to easily ingest these tests and be able to run it with their own provider. They just need to make sure that they're set up a cluster that will operate with their specific provider. So hopefully we'll have that up soon, and it will mainly outline the test that we're going to cover. I think the mechanism of which how we're going to do it is pretty set in stone at this point in time. So we can have more discussions once that comes out. Any questions? Yeah, Elmiko?
First of all, this is great to hear. Thank you for bringing this up. I know at Red Hat, we're doing some work with Karpenter internally, and we've been starting to put together like end-to-end tests and everything. And so I know like one of my colleagues, Max, has been having some conversations there, but I think it would be awesome to be able to see an end-to-end test suite in the Karpenter repo that, yeah, like all providers can just plug in and use with their own. And I know currently there's probably a few details we need to smooth out to get there, but I am like super encouraged by this and very happy to see it. So thank you for bringing it up, Emmanuel, and everyone else who's been kind of thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think I would also like to say we do have a test suite that is not really extensive today that you could potentially plug into. Ideally, we would like to use that same mechanism uh to be able to run the test suite. There is no documentation around it today. It's just been mainly it's just been in the works up to this point, but hopefully we'll have everything be set in stone and ironed out and well documented for everyone to be able to use.
Yeah, totally appreciate that. And like, personally speaking, like I would love to try and exercise it with the cluster API provider as well. And I think like currently some of the EDE tests that are focused on the Quack provider, they use kind of scale sizes that are probably not the best for doing end-to-end tests with like, like AWS provider or Azure provider or something like that. But I figure that's the details we'll get into with the RFC and everything.
Right, definitely. Cool. I guess do you want to talk about your the second update?
Yes, I just wanted to make everyone aware for folks who might be going to KubeCon, that Karpenter will have a booth in the project pavilion of the main exhibitor hall, and I think there'll be office hours, or there'll be a representative there on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday mornings. And I think if anyone here is going to KubeCon and would like to be part of that, please reach out to me on like Kube Slack or something. I'd be more than happy to kind of hook you up with the people who are arranging it and everything. But I'll be there probably, I think I'm going to do a shift Friday morning. And so hopefully it'll just be a great time to kind of talk about Carpenter and chat with people and everything. So, yep, just wanted to let folks know.
It's great. Yeah, sounds great. Cool. Let's move on to RFCs. The only RFC I was able to find today in the upstream project was around configurable registration TTL. Doesn't seem like, I mean, since for our last discussion, there hasn't really been much. I think, Garvin, you just mainly want some comments and feedback on this, right?
Yeah, I need to update the preferred solution, but I think I called it out what we wanted to do in the last comment. But yeah, I need to update that. But we'll love to see people comment. If nothing, I can start some of the implementation.
Okay, that sounds great. I will try to see if we can get a few people to take a look at that this week. Cool. Um, Next point of discussion, we really have one discussion topic. And this is around startup taints in general, but around the race condition where the upstream core project will add the startup taints as part of the registration sync process. Um, this has the effect of being a race condition since some daemon sets only take off startup taints. One will attempt to take off startup taints out uh, on their initial startup, and this can cause Karpenter to re-reconcile so and leaving these taints on again and effectively making the node unusable. So I mean, I guess I can open the floor up for some discussion. We did leave, there is a comment that was left yesterday around what the preferred short-term solution should be around using node affinity uh, on the Carpenter registration label, and specifically on the node pool up label. And then from there we can talk about the long-term breaking change of actually bringing these taint startup taints and just regular taints as part of the kubelet uh, configuration that is sent on startup. I guess, I mean, opening the floor up to any comments. Does anyone have any, I guess, feedback, opinions around this short-term solution?
Um, does the short-term solution even work? Does Carpenter take into account that node selector? And does it expect that label to exist on nodes when
Right.
doing scheduling?
So today it doesn't, right? This is something that we will have to make a release for, making sure that it should account for it. So in today's world, it's not going to work, but this is the short-term solution that doesn't involve a breaking change, that at least from the upstream repo that we could potentially release and have it work for the community until we've ironed out the details as to how we want to go about the breaking change of potentially moving in the startup teams to the cloud providers.
Okay, interesting.
I mean, yeah, I did see you left a few comments, Jeremy, around this. So I guess we would love to hear some of your opinions around, what you think about this.
Yeah, I mean, my thinking is like it is a bug, and the only way to get around it, right, it has to be pushed to the provider or kubelet so that on startup, those startup taints exist, right? If they don't exist on startup, then there's always going to be a race condition, no matter what we do. And I guess I read through the comments. My question is like, why is the current breaking change not, you know, not necessarily what we want to go forward with? Like it seems like either we own the taints or we don't own the taints. Like it seems pretty Boolean for a decision point to me. So I was just a bit confused as to why we would create a workaround.
So the main hesitation is around, at least for the AWS providers, around custom AMIs. Currently, we have an AMI family field inside of the EC2 node class. That specific field doesn't actually inject any use like it doesn't inject the kubelet configuration since we don't have any templating on the user data. So since we're not aware of what the uh, like configuration file is going to be around this specific AMI. So for that particular case, it would be a pretty large breaking change. I'm not really aware if other cloud providers have this kind of concept of a custom AMI or an AMI that a user could just bring in inside of the for the specific cloud provider. So that's really kind of one of kind of the driving hesitations, at least from the AWS side.
Like, I'll just quickly, as I see there's hands up. Like I understand that it's a breaking change, but if we release, Carpenter AWS Provider 2.0 because Semver and this is broken, the users should be able to see from just the version that, hey, there's breaking changes. I should take a look at the release notes. And to me, since this is a bug, it needs to be solved at some point, which means we need to do a breaking change at some point anyway. So I don't know, like, to me, there's no difference like waiting, like if we waited like a month or 6 months, what changes, what needs to change to make it mergeable then versus now. And yeah, I'll just go to the people with hands up, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. I think Amico, you had your hands up first.
Yeah, Emmanuel, did you want to answer what Jeremy was saying there, like before I start?
Yeah, I can go ahead and do that. So I think it's just we want to at least take more time before making this decision. Uh, at least from our side, this would be a pretty quick move to make such a pretty substantial breaking change. It's just more time, and at least giving this workaround for the time being is the way that we want to go forward until we have explored all possible avenues. We also think that we're also considering going to SIG Node to see what their specific opinions may be around node startup and taint, syncing and registration. We feel that they will possibly have similar opinions around just added in on startup, but we just want to make sure that we're at least exploring all avenues before we go ahead and make that specific decision. Please, I also, Jeremy, please do leave your opinion on the actual issue so that we can conserve this conversation as well. Your feedback is definitely appreciated.
Yeah, will do. I'll leave a comment there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I really appreciate what Jeremy's going through and kind of like bringing all this information back to us. It sounds like you're probably fighting with this more directly than I know I am, at least. So I guess I wanted to respond to a couple things here. One, like the short-term solution, I think, it's like I said in my comment, it's not, I don't think it's perfect because it relies on the user having to have a lot of knowledge, like an end user having to have a lot of knowledge about Karpenter when they might not necessarily even know that Karpenter is running on their cluster or something, right? Like I might just be some application developer working on a cluster, and now I'm being told like, hey, make sure to put this node affinity thing in there, otherwise your pod won't run properly. I think that's a lot of load for like, the user to carry. So I don't prefer this short-term solution. Like I think it's, if we have to do it, we have to do it. Now, longer term, and I think getting into what Jeremy's talking about, whether we make this change now or 6 months from now, there's still going to be pain associated with it. I think there's a couple things we could look at here. One, we could look at how the cluster API project made breaking changes as they move forward, because they made a lot of changes in minor revisions that were breaking. So going from like a 1.1 to a 1.2 or something like that. And they were able to handle this in their community. So we might learn a little from how they've done it. And then secondly, I think given that we're talking about changing the way that changing the ownership of these taints, basically from the core Karpenter to the Karpenter providers, we might be able to start this work now, excuse me, if we leaned into the idea of using feature gates inside of Karpenter, right? So we could, or even it could be done through command line flag or something, right? But like we could make Karpenter reactive to feature gates, and then we could allow, we could have put this behind a feature gate, right? So that we could have an orderly deprecation process for this, right? So we keep the functionality the way it is now. We advise users to use this pod affinity, and at the same time, we start developing the new version behind a feature gate, right? And so then like AWS provider and Azure provider maybe could put fixes in immediately for this, right? While the rest of the community is catching up. And then any user who wanted to try out those features, they could turn on the feature gate, and then they would know that they're getting the new features. And so in that way, we could have a very positive gating to say, okay, we're going to keep the current functionality for now in the short term until we've done all of our research and everything, but we're also going to develop this other methodology behind a feature gate, and that will allow us to at least experiment with the provider owning the taints, and maybe in some respects we'll be able to make this better for people who are experiencing the problem currently. So I realize we're still waiting on the RFC to come up. I'll add my comments there when that comes up, but I think that's something we should consider.
Yeah, I mean, in our own discussions, we've definitely considered the idea of using feature gates as being the mechanism to slowly migrate off and making the breaking change a lot less easier. Um, yeah, I think this is just right now, this is the idea that we could potentially, this is the idea that, is in our minds. I think the RFC is definitely going to be the where we hash all these out. So we can't wait for that as well. Garvin, you want to go?
Yeah, we're one of the users of custom AMIs, and I guess from our perspective, like we have always knew that Karpenter doesn't really transfer the labels or the taints from custom AMI over to the running nodes. So we have done the work to make it so that we do it ourselves on the kubelet side. So I guess at least from our side, it was a surprise that Carpenter's doing this now. But I guess beyond that, I think it didn't feel like it's the right solution for Carpenter core to be applying the taints or labels. I think we had a issue open a while back, which is for custom AMI specifically, supporting the ability to transfer the label and taints in a way, either through a file or like environment variables such that like our bootstrapping script can pick those up and apply it to the kubelet rather than what's going on right now, which is this it straight up dropping everything that is in the label and taints. At least like maybe to me is like maybe rather than just killing, I guess it's fine for me to kill this off because we never have the expectation. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but I think supporting a different way to transfer that through the normal mechanism, which is through the custom AMI, through some way of passing through that information to the user data so that even though you're custom AMI, you have a way to ingest that information and giving people a path in custom AMI to do it that way while killing off this feature from core seems to make sense to me because there is some need for that to exist. It just didn't feel right that Carpenter core is doing it. But it does feel right that Carpenter providers should do that in some other mechanism that isn't really supported right now.
Right. So the interesting thing is one of the things that we've discussed around this is having some sort of like user data templating, such that it would become a lot easier. And the migration story for users that are having this, custom Omni family can it will just include the startup taints there as part of that process and effectively synchronizing all the Omni families inside of the AWS provider. That obviously that will also have to happen. Other cloud providers, if they have the similar concept, will also have to do that as well. And that was kind of the idea. We've discussed user data templating, but until now it's really been a nice to have. There wasn't really a need or a use case for it. I think now it's uh, kind of showing us that this is actually maybe the path to go down.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I guess in a way, this also speaks to like not having a clear divide between providers and the core because it seems like we want to do something for everyone, but it didn't fully make sense in the core. And I think we chose a solution possibly because it wasn't obvious where the divide should be. And maybe we need to spend some time figuring out like, hey, what should the provider be doing versus what the core should be doing? And that way we won't ask them to do something like this again. And then we'll have to do some really bad, like backward incompatible rollback or something like that as we move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question that we're always going to be grappling with. What is going to be the fine line, the differentiating between the core project and the
Yeah.
the responsibility of a cloud provider. I do also think that this is the more community, like the more cloud providers we get, the more feedback we're getting. So these kind of conversations are definitely helping us drive in the right direction. So especially with this RFC, I think this will probably be, it might set a little bit of a precedence around what those responsibilities should be in the, going in the future. So yeah, I think the RFC can definitely help us a little bit here. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, feedbacks around this discussion topic?
I guess one small thing is what would help us decide to move forward, right? Like it doesn't sound like we know exactly what. This RFP is great. It is what signals do we need to either do this so that we remove this feature or keep it and do some other thing in the meantime? Like what would our signal be? Does this be like comments in the RFC be like, actually, yes, fine, remove this, or how do we want how do we decide to move forward?
I mean, yeah, I think that once we have the RFC around the, it's mainly for us at least a place to understand the use case, and I think we have a pretty good understanding of the use cases here. Yeah, I think we just want to have at least everything formalized and at least everybody to be on the same page. I think there is, since we have two different options right now that are on the table, I think having the RFC and having that be the place where we can get everyone's feedback and opinions would be the best place. I know that doesn't really help answer the question of like as to what moving forward. I think the next best thing is to have the RFC and see like where where everyone is at.
But yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That being said, I don't see any other discussion topics that were brought up by community members. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, anything that you would like to discuss? Okay. If none, then I think we can call it an end to to this meeting. Thanks everyone for joining. Hope you have a great rest of your days.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Too.
Bye.